I begin pilot training. The frustrations of waiting to begin my pilot training ended when I left London for Babbacombe near Torquay and Devon. My father and my girlfriend saw me off from Paddington Station and wished me well. Previously, the farthest I had been in the West Country was Somerset, so I was looking forward to the journey into a new county. The weather was really spring-like and I was captivated during the latter part of the train journey by the glorious Devonshire coastline. I was to join the Aircrew Reception Centre, ACRC, at R.A.F. Babbacombe, a former very popular seaside resort adjacent to the larger resort of Torquay. On arrival we were assembled and told that we were to be billeted out in private homes. For 1 week we were to be at Babbacombe. From ACRC we would go to ground training at an initial training wing elsewhere. The week at Babbacombe was an easy one for those of us who had already seen some service. Most of the chaps coming to ACRC were just entering the service and going straight into aircrew training. Which is what I would have done had I not accepted the option on entering the service earlier. What had appeared a doubtful move when I joined up in March, became somewhat of an asset. Those of us who had been in the service before enjoyed the fact that, by comparison, we were not sprogs but almost old hands. We had done most of the things to be done at ACRC, namely, induction procedures, kitting out and the initial medical requirements, so we had lots of spare time to enjoy Babbacombe and Torquay. I was billeted with a middle-aged lady and her teenage daughter in a pleasant suburban home. The daughter turned out to be rather a temperamental and spoiled female dog who spent hours practicing the violin, hoping to become the concert violinist. However, she was quite attractive and did condescend to go out with me a few times, which only proved to me that we were not very compatible. Not to worry, it was only for 7 days and I was off again, this time to really get down to serious training. The chaps that had come in from civilian life at ACRC were all of good quality and from varied backgrounds. We had men who had been educated at Eton, from university, and down to the humbler forms of educational backgrounds such as myself. There was less a range of social difference than I had experienced in the airmen I had been with previously. The level of intellect and ability certainly appeared higher as one would expect. Once again, as in a previous experience, I soon formed new friendships and that would be more lasting as we went on to further training together. There were a few initial training wings around UK and the one I hoped to go to was Newquay in Cornwall. I was delighted when I learned that I was one of the people fortunate enough to be chosen for number 8 ITW Newquay. One interesting feature of Torquay was that a large hospital there had been taken over by the R.A.F. Torquay was, therefore, full of officers and other aircrew who were recovering from hospital treatment, many of whom were survivors from the fighter pilots who fought in the Battle of Britain. We felt great pride and sympathy for them and hoped that our future would be luckier than theirs. The house I was billeted in previously had a Czech fighter pilot staying with them and he came on leave to stay at the house whilst I was there. We had several trips to town together and I was fascinated by the stories of his exploits as a Spitfire pilot in the Battle of Britain. The week at Babbacombe ended and a group of us set off for Newquay, a further extension to my first visit so far west. The countryside changed on the journey by train from Torquay to Newquay as we steamed inland over the Cornish moors, past the famous Dartmoor prison, which I had heard and read so much about. The prison had a history of housing the most dangerous criminals and from where there were a few successful escapes. Viewing the bleakness of the moorland showed how desolate and grim the area was and how difficult it would be to get clear of the prison on the moors. The countryside changed dramatically as we left the moors and moved into the grandeur of the Cornish coast. Newquay, like Torquay, had been a much sought after seaside resort pre-war but subsequently had been turned into a big R.A.F. training area. It was close to an important operational base, R.A.F. St. Eval, a few miles out of the town, which housed coastal and fighter squadrons. It was a strategic location in the southwestern defense area of Britain. Newquay had always boasted a large number of beautiful hotels and these had now been requisitioned to billet airmen and to be used as training facilities. On arrival we were allocated one of these hotels for accommodation. The hotel my group were based in was the Trebarwith Hotel, magnificently appointed on a cliff, just on the edge of town, with a superb ocean view. Lovely grounds and steps down the cliff onto a large sandy beach. It was the sort of place I had always dreamt of staying. Of course, the hotel had been stripped of all its finery and was just the stark building, without carpets, which had become just a military-style dormitory. The servants had also gone. After locating our room and bed spaces, we were paraded outside, where we met Corporal Shepard, who was to be in charge of our flight for discipline and drill. We lined up and were brought to attention and then stood at ease. To our surprise, Corporal Shepard posed the question, "Do any of you know my mother?" We chatted about this question with some curiosity, but were soon shaken by the stentorian comment from the corporal, quote, "Well, you're going to know her son," unquote. The dowry corporal had been serving 18 years and it was rumored that he had been a sergeant who lost his rank for having thumped another more senior NCO. I got on fine with him as he knew I was intent on pursuing a full-time service career. Despite his reduction in rank, he was not bitter and treated us firmly, but fairly, and he was also an excellent drill instructor. Most of the chaps in my flight were new into the service and had to be taught the various drills from scratch. Naturally, as those of us who had previous service were finding the drill easier. One corporal in charge of a flight at another ITW used to call the squad creepy crawly things and then say, "What are you?" They had to reply as a chorus, "Creepy crawly things, Corporal." Life in the service sure had its oddities. Amongst our overall wing were some ex-army chaps who had transferred to the R.A.F to become air crew, all of whom were either corporals or sergeants. They had all seen fighting already with the army and some had come out of the battles of Dunkirk and Norway. They all had interesting tales to tell of their dramatic experiences. These chaps were excused most of the drill and only attended certain parades, or took over the flights to relieve the permanent staff. Strangely enough, following my rejection by the Royal Navy, I formed a close relationship with one Harry Dixon, who had transferred from the Royal Navy. Harry had been an engineer in the fleet arm and had been allowed to transfer to the R.A.F to train as a pilot. We shared a room and we got on very well together. He was also very helpful to me with his technical knowledge of the aircraft and his experience in the fleet air arm, coupled with the depth of information on all types of planes. Our time was spent in a mixture of classroom work and outdoor training. Great attention was paid to physical training and recreation. The latter was great fun as we were enjoying lovely weather, thereby enabling us to do all the training on the lovely stretch of sand beneath the cliff below the hotel. We also played a lot of football on the sands and went for regular swims after each session. Near the end of the 6 weeks course we had a sports day in which I ran the mile race. Competing with me were the current 3AS national champion from Middlesex and the country champion from Cambridgeshire. I was delighted to come second, just a few yards behind the national champion. Which proved to me that what I had aimed for when I was training for the mile before the war had been a very reachable goal. I was a keen swimmer, but this almost ended in disaster. One evening after duty I went for a swim and swam out from the shore, then turned round to swim back. To my horror I did not seem to be making any progress, not realizing that I had swum out on a receding tide. Fortunately, I kept my head and just struck out steadily and slowly, very slowly. Finally the shore came closer until I could touch the beach underneath me. I staggered up to the sand and almost collapsed with fatigue. I had obviously put myself in great danger of drowning. It was a lesson I have never forgotten, and whenever I have wanted to swim long distances in the sea again I have always swum parallel to the shore and within easy reach of safety. The classroom work was hard, varied and interesting, comprising mathematics, basic navigation and meteorology, signals, Morse and Alder's lamp, airmanship, aircraft recognition and basic technical knowledge of aircraft. There was also a certain amount of general service lectures, procedures, customs, regulations and the Air Force law etc. The aim was to give us a balanced knowledge of the technical side of the service and basic pilot training theory to enable us to qualify for elementary flying training. I failed the mathematics first time, but was allowed to reset the exam, which I fortunately passed the second time. Mathematics and the like have never been my strong point. A weakness which had not been helped by my rather limited education, apart from which the subject had been largely self-taught. The 6 weeks progressed and we got better at each subject, coming to enjoy the training as it became more practical, when one could see its usefulness for the future. One flight, under the guidance of Corporal Shepard, became really first class at turnout and drill. It was here and I first did continuity drill. This type of drill is now often seen at military displays and requires the squad of men to carry out a series of drill maneuvers on only one word of command. We became very proud of our progress, and each morning when we were marched into the center of town for a break at the local cake shop, Corporal Shepherd would give us one word of command as we approached the shop, whence we would halt, turn into line, right dress, stand at ease, come back to attention and half turn to dismiss and fall out, all on that one word of command. The main street at Newquay was always full of people who would stop and watch us and even turn out of shops as we performed our drill. Sometimes they would clap our efforts and we all felt 10 foot tall. It was no wonder that, thanks to Corporate Shepherd, we won the Best Flight Award for turnout and drill at the end of the course. One of our ground training exams was in reading Morse code by Aldous Lamp, which one of our number could just not cope with. We carried out the tests in pairs with one chap reading and other writing down your answers. I was very good at this type of activity, so we devised a scheme where the chap who could not cope stood, with his writer in front of me. I would then blink in Morse the appropriate answer to the writer who wrote my answers down. By this means we got the recalcitrant trainee through, a source of great amusement to us all. We also used the system to pass short messages when we didn't want to be overheard. Newquay had lovely walks along the cliffs and the golf course, and we enjoyed lots of fun taking local girls along. Bunkers on golf courses can be used to good effect when the course is closed, a perfect place for enjoying the closer company of female companionship. No club secretary to ask for green fees. Having passed all our tests and exams and having enjoyed a really glorious 6 weeks of training in this magnificent part of England, we received the news of where we will be going to commence flying. Training. The warhead seems rather far away, apart from the constant flow of aircraft flying their operational missions from nearby St. Eval. One event brought us up with a jolt. I had been attending church along with a few others where we had been part of the choir, when on our way back we collected the Sunday papers. The dramatic news of Hitler's invasion of Russia were banner headlines. The war was certainly getting wider and more devastating, and we pondered on the effects of this fatal turn of events. Finally, we got our posting, and after 7 days leave I was to go to an elementary flying training school at R.A.A.F Watchfield near Swindon in Oxfordshire. On completion of ITW we were promoted to leading aircraftsman with a big rise in pay from 2 shillings and 6 pence per day to 7 shillings and 6 pence per day. I was pleased to learn that several of my new friends were also posted to Watchfield. Home for 7 days, fit, tanned and happy, I was again well received in London by the family as I prepared myself for the great adventure of beginning to actually learn to fly.